So we're going to talk about infrastructure and applied machine learning in Milestone 1. And again, welcome to GitLab, Alexander. Glad you and Unreview are part of the company now.
Thanks a lot.
So, so we had some pre-read in the document. I think, is it worth, I don't know if everybody had a chance to go through, is it worth doing a quick overview of the components of Unreview and Milestone 1, or should we just skip to the discussion of the questions? Happy to do an overview if anybody would like.
I think, I mean, I was able to read the slide deck and also really familiar with the epic, but I think an overview would be fantastic.
Okay, awesome. So if you look at the epic, which is linked in the doc, epic 5794, and that picture that I linked to the direct comment is, and I'll turn it over to Alexander and others to do more of it, is Milestone 1 is a proof of concept. It is not integrated into the GitLab product. It's a proof of concept to use Unreview on the GitLab product itself, so we can dog food it ourselves. And when doing that, there's a number of components that are part of Unreview today that may or may not be part of things when we integrate it with the product. So the idea here for Milestone 1 is to create perhaps a separate portion, separate space in GCP, in GitLab's GCP, to implement Unreview pretty much as is, as much as we can, and where we can't change it, to then export from the GitLab product the data we need, probably through GraphQL, then run it in this separate instance, and then so we can do recommendations via applied machine learning of maintainers and reviewers, and then pass that back to the product, either where it's displayed in Unreview itself, or perhaps in the product as comments or something like that, so that GitLab team members can use it and dog food it ourselves as we develop GitLab, not customer used yet. And that is the initial idea. Alexander, what part of that, and Taylor and others, what part of that did I get right, and what part of that would you change?
So as I understood, so I think during the first milestone, we just need to find some equivalents on the Google Cloud platform, because I used Azure to build some components, so we need to find some other tools just to replace during the first. As long as Unreview uses the API of GitLab, so I think we just need to find how to replicate, for instance, Kafka or Azure Data Factory, and that's all for the first milestone, as I see.
Yeah, so it seems like there's a number of open source components in Unreview. So there's Kafka, there's Hive, there's MongoDB, and they're all just general open source things that we'd want to implement in GCP just for this proof of concept. ADF, the Azure Data, I forget what DF stands for. What is it called again? Functions?
Azure Data Factory.
Azure Data Factory. So that's not something, of course, we'd want to use at GCP. It doesn't apply to GCP. So I think that's the primary one we need to find a replacement for. Is that accurate, or would there be others?
Yeah, that's true, because I use ADF to preprocess data, and then I store the preprocessed data in MongoDB.
So we'll need to find a replacement. I think the only thing we're going to have to find a replacement for the proof of concept is ADF. The others, Hive, Mongo, and Kafka, we should be able to implement ourselves. But by we, I mean the development team should be able to implement at GCP. If we're given by infrastructure the kind of the space to do that, and separate from the rest of the product. So Steve, it looks like just on the milestone, it looks like you have a comment you want to verbalize.
Yeah, so a question there, and I'll take the opportunity to say welcome, Alexander. It's great to have you, and great to have this as part of our future part of the product. So that's awesome. So Wayne, you were saying milestone 1 is a POC. I just want to kind of understand, like, and I think I got it from something you're mentioning there. It is one difference. There's probably many differences, but is one difference in thinking about this as a POC versus like the initial MVC of a feature, the intent that it's not going to be basically available to customers for use. It'll only be used by GitLab. Is that part of it, or am I thinking about that wrong?
Only used by team members.
By team members. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Right. That's a good distinction there. Okay. And then and do you see that as kind of a key characteristic of a point at which this would transition from a POC into something else? Would be that we'd have the findings of the POC, and before it would be open for wider use. I think doing things like later on, Brent's got a question about readiness review and everything, but those would be some of the things that we would do prior to customer use. Is that correct?
Yes. And so Milestone 2 is, I remember correctly, is the beginning of customer use, or have the ability to get with, actually, let me make sure that's accurate. I have the milestones linked to each other. So Milestone 2, which is 2 months after Milestone 1, is customer-facing MVC integration. So Milestone 2 is, which is linked to that first epic and second epic, is customer-facing for .com customers only, not for self-hosted, and MVC, so minimal viable change, and controlled by a feature flag. We don't intend to turn it on for all customers, right away, et cetera. And it also involves integration with the GitLab product itself. So instead of, for example, or in addition to showing the recommended maintainers and reviewers that the unreviewed components come up with in a comment, it would actually be part of the product itself, or it would show it in the product itself when users are selecting maintainers and reviewers. And Taylor's already thrown some ideas in there on what that UI might look like. But that's when we'd actually integrate it with the product. But the scope is, with Milestone 2, is .com customers only, and probably a relatively small number to start. Ourselves dog fooding it, but also we haven't talked through this, but definitely not roll it to one customer on day 1 and then 100% on day 10. It would be, I think it'd be a slow rollout. We haven't worked those details out yet, but it wouldn't be a fast rollout, because also machine learning workload takes up a lot of CPU power, of course. So we'd want to make sure we plan that out as well.
Great, thank you for that.
I'll just add, this is intended at the moment to be an ultimate only feature. So thinking through like the cost profile, our margins, as well as just how many customers actually use that, like just restricting to ultimate cuts off a lot of concerns. I'll also mention that if you think about how we use review roulette today, I think that's a good way to think through what this sort of initial POC will end up looking like. Review roulette, you trigger it, it posts a comment. That I think will end up being kind of what this POC ends up looking like. And to me, success is, do we get a POC capable of producing logically and just very clearly better results than what review roulette can provide today? And that is kind of, to me, the gate that says, all right, we're ready to now move on to trying to expose this to customers.
So can I ask a few technical questions?
Please. And Alexander, as you do that, if you have time, put them in the either just before or as or after. Add your thoughts. Type your thoughts too, if you would. But actually, since Brent already has some thoughts in there, maybe Brent, you want to verbalize yours, and then we'll go over to Alexander's.
Yeah, I just wanted to recommend an approach that we take from Milestone 1, and that similar to what we've done for other teams, where we've set them up with an isolated GCP project where they have full access. We're doing this for sharding, a couple other efforts. So my suggestion here for Milestone 1 is we do the same, but then also figure out a time when it makes sense to begin a readiness review. And just from a high level readiness review allows us to start having, and Alexander, welcome, for Alexander's benefit here. Readiness review allows us to start having an asynchronous/synchronous discussion about like architecture thoughts and stuff and things like that, so that we can get prepared as we get into progressive milestones and we start to incorporate more and more things and align. Because one of the big things that we need to do from the infrastructure side, from delivery, also within reliability, is get ready for like how we deliver this and get it to production. So having the readiness review sooner rather than later, rather than at the end, like during a significant milestone, would be important here.
No, and I definitely agree. It's great ideas, Brent, and I'll definitely add the readiness review to milestone 2. We'll also want, and our scope right now is milestone 1, but when we start closing in on starting milestone 2, one of the key things will be, well, we have these various components like MongoDB in under review, like Kafka, like Hive, and those things are not part of the GitLab architecture today for either .com or self-hosted. So we do want potentially in the future a portion of this functionality to be available for self-hosted, and that poses all sorts of challenges. But even for .com, do we want to make these components part of our architecture for the product, and which gives us a lot of benefits and flexibility and features, but also requires us to be able to maintain it, scale it, secure it, etc. So there's one of the tasks in milestone 1 is to do that evaluation of what, we have these various components, like with MongoDB, which is a great document store. Is that, do we want to make that part of the GitLab architecture, or do we want to use something that exists today, like the Postgres ability to store documents? But is that good enough? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And other than, so there's going to be a lot of discussions there, and we definitely like your or somebody from your team's input on those as we work to try to make those decisions with you. And I will tag you, Brent, in that specific issue to make sure if I haven't already, make sure you've seen it, and then definitely get it to your team as appropriate. Alexander, what were your technical questions? And if you could type them in the doc as well, that'd be great. The doc link to the meeting.
I'm just trying to understand. Okay, during the first milestone, we will use the public API like it has right now. Okay, but for example, during the next milestone, how are we going to integrate? So through the public API as now, or we'll find another solution? Because there is also another issue. For example, we need to retrain the model. For example, each week, each day. So we have to find this interval.
Yeah, it's a great question. We often use, I don't know if we can answer today, but it's definitely a question we need to answer. So we often use the GraphQL API inside the product itself, with the various APIs to do things. So we could go directly to the database though, if we chose to. We'd have to, maybe the GraphQL API doesn't have the features we need to do it at scale. Maybe it does, but that's one of the things we need to discuss is what are the pros and cons of the various approaches. Without knowing all the details, or without knowing many of the details, I would nudge us towards using GraphQL if it'll meet our needs versus going directly to the database, but I don't know if it will meet our needs. But Michał, with the kinds of things that you've done on other teams and into the architecture, what would you guess would be a good approach for this? And again, just a guess at this point.
My guess is that using the database directly would probably give us the least work required if we want more data than the GraphQL API exposes. I mean, if GraphQL exposes everything we want, we can use it. On the other hand, it has limits, like we're going to be issuing hundreds of queries against it because there is a limit how many results can a GraphQL API endpoint return. So we'll be like issuing several bigger queries or hundreds of smaller GraphQL queries. And also depends on the data we want from the API. If we want something that the API doesn't expose currently, then it means some merge requests will be in order to fix that.
Great stuff. So again, we're not trying to decide today, but this is a great discussion to start having today. So Steve, you had, you put in there private, so we can
Actually, are you going to post this for public or private?
Public.
Okay.
So yeah, so we definitely need to keep track of not only the functionality, but performance and capacity impacts of whatever decisions we make.
Yeah, we can talk about my comment offline.
Yep. The machine learning does put a high load, not only pulling the data, but in general, put a high load running machine learning workloads on. So we need to plan for that as well.
Yeah, and I think you're already familiar with the thing that I'm referring to. So
yep, good stuff. Cool, Alexander, I cut you off, I think, a little bit before. Any other technical questions or other thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, going back to GraphQL, for instance, I didn't find a way how to identify is a user a bot or not. And for instance, we have to do that if we make recommendations. Because right now, if we check, for instance, sometimes in the top 10 recommendations, we see bots. And I didn't find a way how to remove them, how to filter them. So
that's a great point. I don't actually, Mihao, do you know, or Taylor, or anybody else?
I don't recall if there is a column in the database saying that's something a bot or not. I think most people, when they create a user for an integration, external integration, they create a normal GitLab user. So that's a tough question.
We might need a configuration to say who is this a human or not?
We might just add we just might add a Boolean flag when you're creating a user account to like, hey, is this a bot?
So I also don't want to comment.
Go ahead, Brent. Sorry.
Oh, I'm like, I don't want a solution here, but I did want to mention that based on my previous experience in the admin this weekend, there is no differentiation, at least in the admin, what surface there between a bot or not. And I don't want a solution here, but my recommendation would be that maybe we suggest a feature where bot users don't have a password. They are merely created and they have API keys. So anyway, as another mechanism to delineate. Sorry, Steve.
No reason to be sorry. I was actually only going to make a humorous comment in that, like, if we don't have that, we should have, bot or not somewhere. But then that probably doesn't have the best etymology. So maybe Wayne's suggestion of like human or not is probably better.
I think there is also another way. For instance, if we recommend a bot, a person can easily say that, okay, I'm not satisfied with that recommendation, and we can exclude those users from the recommendations.
Yeah, I think the system will learn that over time, like you're saying. But it'd be great to be able to give it some advice in advance on human or not, so it doesn't make those recommendations. Well, I guess bots will rarely be assigned maintainer or review, be asked to be a maintainer or reviewer. So I think the history will show that they're not. But that doesn't mean, but that's not the only criteria for, determining if somebody should be a maintainer or a reviewer of a change, is if they've done one before. That's not the only thing. So yeah, it's good things to consider. I'm sure we're gonna have another 20 questions like that of what do we do in this situation, what do we do in that situation, et cetera.
Yeah, right now, for instance, we have to clone the repository to extract some more information that we cannot extract using the public API. As I remember, this relates to files that are changed in commits.
You mean precise commit data, like which files were modified at which positions? I don't think.
Sorry. Right now, under review doesn't use position, but I think later it will be. Yeah, we will use.
I don't think that's discoverable using public API, so we'd have to fix that, or we have to investigate if we can access that from the database directly. I don't think that's the case. I think GitLab would do that, but I'm not exactly sure.
It would be. I think it would be amazing to have a document where we can write all these issues. but I'm not sure. Maybe there
Or
is
an
not a
issue.
way.
I think actually it might be good to capture these in an issue linked off of milestone 1 or 2 is, Alexander, it'd be great, create that issue and just start putting, questions we want to answer. It can be very open-ended, and then we can, keep that issue public as well, so we can get feedback from not only, this group and other team members, but the public. Yeah, if you could create that issue, and these are great things to put in it.
Okay, I just was trying to finish all the trainings today on my onboarding. Yeah.
Yeah, no rush, absolutely, when you get time. Well,
But I
Steve
think
and
that-
Brent, our focus today was on infrastructure, although we discussed many other things too. Do you have what you need from us at this point? Do you think are we on a good track here? Are there any other feedback?
No, I mean, from my end, I'm satisfied with a deeper understanding of like what milestone 1 versus milestone 2 represents, and I see a collaborative path forward on like how we can enable, in the similar fashion that we did for like the sharding POC and other teams, to have an area to start developing milestone 1 in.
And then I have not put in requests for things like that before. Mihal maybe has, or maybe Taylor has, but I guess we'll probably be asking it somewhere like, how do we put in those requests to ask for those resources in GCP?
Yeah, we don't have a proper workflow for that, but I will point you towards what we did for sharding, and we can work async on that.
Sounds great. Thanks, Brent.
Thanks for hosting the conversation and everything. And Alexander, if you finished all of the onboarding stuff up to date today for you, you'd be the first person to do that. So give yourself some slack. So there's a lot to do there.
There's a lot there, that's for sure. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Great discussion. And Alexander and Taylor and Mihal will be talking with our first actually group meeting tomorrow, but it's great to get a head start on that and talking with the infrastructure team. So have a great day, everybody. Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye. Cheers.